It's the end of the day with Ray. Hello, my friends. Well, today we're going to jump on the Sharp Interactive board. We're going to go through Canon's FY 2022. The numbers are in. And folks, I got to do a big shout out to Canon because they had some pretty good achievements. They had their highest top line revenue since 2017. Congratulations on that at $30.3 billion. They also had a pretty respectable operating profit, 8.8%. And ladies and gentlemen, when I think about Canon, I have to start thinking about the presentation I did yesterday regarding Konicka's third quarter. And in that presentation, I asked a question. Can an OEM, an original equipment manufacturer, go into the marketplace and sell things they don't make? And the answer is no, they can't. I'm convinced of it. When I go through Konicka's financial information, they talk a lot about digital strategies and transformation and IT services. When I go through Canon's financial presentation, none of that. They talk about the products they make. The products they make and how they're going to supply those products. They don't talk about ECM. They don't talk about ERP selling. They don't talk about IT services. They talk about stuff they make, they take into the marketplace, and they sell it. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm convinced that OEMs, original equipment manufacturers, after a decade and a half of some of the folks attempting to get into this IT services and sell services on things they don't make, hasn't really gone very well. I don't think it's going to go very well as we continue on. And I think folks like Canon are proven. Stick to your core, make stuff, put it out in the marketplace through dealer distribution. Put it out in the marketplace through dealer distribution. I'm going to say that again because I don't believe OEMs having a direct operation, especially in the print world, makes any sense whatsoever. And I'll still predict that Canon will, in fact, shed itself of its Canon Direct USA operations. They will definitely do it sooner or later because they're going to continue to focus on their profitability. They're going to continue to realize that print is declining. They're going to continue to have aspirations to do other things. And I'll share some of those thoughts as we go through their financials. So without any further ado, let's just jump on the Sharp Interactive board. And there's that top line number, $30.3 billion, operating profit of $2.7 billion. And folks, you know, I have a question down here. When will Canon's focus take a major shift away from print? And I want you to kind of think about that as we're going through this presentation. They're not going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? But at the end of the day, you know, they're looking at other things and other products, but they're not looking at other services. They're looking for other things they can make. And that's a big difference with what we see with some of the other OEMs. And I think it's a cautionary tale for those other OEMs. So I wanted to look and see the composition of this revenue from around the geography. And folks, in the Americas, we represent $9.5 billion of that revenue. In Japan, it was $6.5 billion. Europe is $7.8 billion. Asia and Oceania is $6.6 billion. So the vast majority of Canon's revenue is, in fact, coming out of Americas. I want to remind everybody back in 2017, back in 2019, when Xerox was trying to take out HP, Canon said, hey, wait a second. If you do that, you know, you're going to lose our business. And basically, Canon at that time was pulling about $5 billion worth of their revenue from HP. And so I'm thinking, is that $5 billion from HP coming out of that $9.5 billion in the Americas revenue? Is that number still the same, $5 billion? If it is, that's 30% of the Americas revenue is coming from HP. And we all know if we looked at HP lately, their supplies, they're not growing, right? We all know that print's declining. A major customer representing 30% of your business, if in fact it's coming out of the Americas bucket, that's something we got to pay attention to, and I'm sure Canon's on top of that. But I also have to ask about Canon USA. Where's that revenue at? I would imagine that's in the Americas bucket, right? And folks, that's just Canon Direct. Like I said, I really believe that they'll get rid of Canon Direct. There's no reason for an OEM in the year 2023 and beyond to really be out there selling direct print equipment. I mean, they can use the major disties to do it. They can use the dealer distributors to do it. IT service providers go out there and sell the print. I mean, people can buy it online through Amazon. At the end of the day, I don't really see a play for them to continue to deliver print equipment direct to the end user. Because in fact, through their whole financials, they don't talk about delivering to those end users anything else but print. And we all know that print's declining, so I just think it's a moot point for them to have them. Let's look at the printing business as a whole. So the printing business as a whole is $17 billion for the year. They had a $1.6 billion operating profit. But ladies and gentlemen, when I was going through the different divisions of Canon, just like I did with Konica Minolta yesterday, I see this corporate and others had a revenue of $1.7 billion and operating profit loss of $553 million. And by the way, they increased that from what they projected they would lose by $45 million. So we're sitting on a $553 million operating profit loss in the category others and corporate at $1.7 billion in revenue. Maybe that's the direct operation. Maybe that's Canon USA. Maybe that's whatever that is. It's interesting. Wouldn't be nice if we actually knew what that was. But in the printing as a group, you know, top line $17 billion, operating profit at $1.6 billion. You know, and folks, Canon realizes that the people aren't printing as much in their houses. Okay, the work from home thing, they even mentioned that in here. As for printing, although revenue was up significantly due to growth in the unit sales of each product, profit was down, reflecting a significant increase in parts and logistical cost and a decline in consumable sales as home demand for inkjet printers peaked out. So I don't know who was talking about that a while back, that the print from home thing is really just a big bubble and no one's going to print in their houses and all that kind of stuff. It looks like that was probably the right thing to say about that. But let's look at the office section of the printing business. The office section of the printing business did $6.7 billion in top line revenue. And one thing that Canon does not do is when they break out the groups within the printing group, they don't tell you what the operating profit is for each group. They just tell you the operating profit of the whole group itself, of all the groups combined. They only give you the revenue. They really should give you the operating profit for each group so you'd kind of know which group was doing good. But, you know, they're talking about office MFDs and they're excited and they're still... The thing that's a little bit disturbing with some of the language Canon uses, in my opinion, I mean, these are smart folks, obviously, but when they still talk about the office and the home worker and they have some kind of a reference that that's going to determine print, I just think everybody's crazy when they think this way. It doesn't matter where they're at. It matters that they're not printing. That's what matters. Instead of trying to figure out where they're going to print, we all need to start figuring out what they're not going to print. Instead of figuring out where they're going to print, we all need to figure out what they're not going to print, because what they're not going to print continues to add up, okay? As they build new processes to eliminate print altogether. And as long as we continue to focus on this nonsense about where they're going to print, what's in their house and what's in the office, and if they're in the office, we got to, decentralize stuff because they're used to working at home and they might want to print. All this nonsense is irrelevant. What's relevant is the businesses across the world, every single day, guess what? They print less. And every single day, they'll continue to need to print less. They won't have the need to print. Let's look at the prosumer, $7.6 billion in revenue. Again, there's no operating profit. Same old language about where people are printing. They do say that, the print business is about 80% of the volume of where it was. They don't expect it to go any further than that. We all knew that, right? Let's look at their production space, $2.7 billion in the production space. And folks, this whole fantasy from all the OEMs about production being this big growth engine, we're going to all make all kinds of billions of dollars in production print. It's all temporary. It's 100% displacement growth. I wish that the production print and industrial print people would start really surveying these end users that are buying this equipment and see how much their volumes have declined. Because now they're able to go in there and buy the Canon or the Ricoh or the Konica because they're getting rid of the Heidelberg press. The big old press that had to have a trench in the floor and the big fire down there and all that crazy stuff, right? Because the volumes drop so much. They're able to buy this lower end equipment, if you will. And sooner or later, the volume will continue to decline, right? And this is all displacement growth, and it's very, very vulnerable. Because just like in business processes where people are eliminating the need to print, they're also eliminating the need to print in all these other processes. Think about marketing. Think about mail, direct mail. Think about the postage rates going up and going up. The reality of it is, folks, people aren't printing near as much as they were 5 or 6 years ago. It's fantasy. And you might get excited because you're running in there with your Konica or your Canon or your Ricoh, and you got this big giant industrial machine and you're going to go sell it to this printer. But I think you need to start asking those printers you're selling this stuff to, how much is your volume decline? What are some of the big customers you lost? What applications are you not printing anymore? Because we're living in a world that's declining, and we think it's this massive growth potential. I just think everybody needs to pay attention to production in ways that they're not paying attention to. Let's talk about their projections. And folks, they're going to project $32.3 billion. They want to break another record, right? And they're going to have $2.7 billion operating profit. There's probably no reason to think they're not going to hit those numbers. I mean, I don't think they will. I think they'll hit them. Let's go over here and look at the printing projections. They're going to do $17.8 billion, and they're going to do $1.6 billion in profit. No reason to think they won't hit those numbers. Here's something interesting. When you look at their inventories right now, they're sitting on 15% of their total for the year in the print category. So their forecast for 2023, they got 15% of that total in inventory, $2.7 billion. So they're sitting on some inventory, and you know, hopefully they can get it out in the marketplace. They probably will. You know, folks are still out there overspeccing and overselling A3s. You know, a lot of the processes within the imaging channel itself, especially the business print, haven't changed enough. The new innovators aren't coming in there yet, causing all kinds of havoc to you, but they're coming. But all these contracts you all are signing up right now, next cycle, it ain't going to happen the way it did this cycle. So they might liquidate some of that equipment now. But we get into that 2 or 3 years from now, we're going to see a whole different story. They have a total of $6 billion in inventory for all of their groups, which represents about 20% of their projected revenue for the year. So they're sitting on 20% of their revenue in actual inventory. Here's something interesting. You know, we talked about cash flow and the lack of it when I was talking about Konica yesterday, but free cash flow for Canon, you can see they're always above the line. They've been since 2018. That's kind of good, right? And folks, they're projecting their free cash flow to go up pretty high. I don't know if they're going to do that. I mean, that would be more than they've had since 2018. I don't quite believe they're going to get that high with that. But their their cash flow from operations is in good shape. So obviously, Canon is not spending more than they're bringing in. So kudos to Canon for that. And folks, this is my last slide. And Canon has realized the importance in transitioning away from print. Okay? And they're transitioning away from print in ways that are profitable. They're not sacrificing a lot of their profit to do something that's probably pie in the sky. So you got to give them credit for that. Now, we don't know what that $553 million loss in other category was. But at the end of the day, for the most part, they're transitioning their company, but they're transitioning their company in those divisions by making equipment and improving equipment for the world. They're making equipment. That's what they do. They're an original equipment manufacturer. But if you look at their new business, okay, it was 22% in 2017 of their total revenue. And new business is their innovations. You know, this is what we're bringing to the market that's new. Digital cameras and all this kind of stuff. And folks, when you think about it, it's gone from 22% in 2017 to 29% in 2023. I mean, it's safe to say that by 2025, over 30% of Canon's revenue will be new business. We know by the numbers that Canon print represents over 50% of their revenue. But sooner or later, Canon print, all its supplies, all its parts, all its components, I don't care what group of the printing group it's in, will probably represent what? 40%? Then it will represent 30%. What's the percentage it has to represent at Canon before they really take seriously consideration on eliminating it? What is Canon direct here in the United States? You know, when does Canon corporate realize, yeah, we don't need to be doing direct anymore? Because Canon's not going to lose money. And as Canon focuses on these new business opportunities, they're going to look at the old business opportunities and make sure that they're still relevant. And if not, I believe they'll probably exit from them. Just some things to think about, my friends. But again, congratulations, Canon. You had a great year for 2022. And everybody watching me knows this: status quo is the killer of all that'll be invented.